Let, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have all 5 council members.
There you go. Sounds good. So do you want to go ahead at starting the meeting and going through the
I could start.
the information items?
Will do. Thank you for joining us this evening for the December 21st, 2021 Monte Sereno City Council meeting. Before the meeting is called to order, I would like to point out a few house rules to assist council members, staff, and members of the public to successfully participate in this meeting. Council members, your microphone is live, so please keep your microphones on mute until you wish to speak. For tonight's meeting, we are using Zoom to host the City Council regular meeting. At the bottom of the Zoom client, there are 2 icons, chat and raise hand. Please use chat only to report technical issues such as being unable to hear a council member speaking. Please use raise hand to be recognized by the mayor and able to speak to the council. To comment under oral communication or on any agenda item, you're allowed 3 minutes to speak per agenda item. Emails limited to 350 words can also be submitted to the city clerk and it will be read into the record. The word limit is set to adhere to the typical 3-minute time allowance. Only attendees using the Zoom application can use the raise hand option to comment. Participants calling in from a telephone will only be able to listen and cannot provide feedback or public comment. Lastly, because we are all not in the same room, all votes at this meeting will be taken by roll call.
Thank you. Do you want to go ahead and take the roll?
Councilmember Lawler.
Present.
Councilmember Luthold.
Present.
Councilmember Turner.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mekachek.
Present.
And Mayor Elahi.
Present. Thank
And
you.
we have a quorum.
And, okay, thank you. Welcome to the meeting. And we're going to start the meeting today with the Pledge of Allegiance. Michelle, do you have the flag ready to go?
Give me 1 moment.
All right. I thought we'd put that back in, and while she's getting that, just a little information on the Pledge of Allegiance. Originally, it was I pledge allegiance to my flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And it didn't become a part of the legislation until about 1942 when the Congress adopted the US Flag Code. And the name Pledge of Allegiance was adopted in 1945. And some of the change that was made, the words under God and after one nation were added. So if you're ready, and I'm going to start with reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. And what I would request is, I've asked our youth commission to take it on, and maybe one of them can appear every time we do it. But we should have a backup, and my suggestion would be each of our council members could lead the next one, and so on. Maybe our Mayor Pro Tem would do the next one, and then if he's here, or if he's on Zoom, I guess we could do that too. Okay.
I apologize, it's taking a minute.
Wonderful. Almost there. Excellent, thank you. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Are there any changes in the orders of the day?
There are no changes from the clerk.
And do we have any presentations that anybody has to make?
I am not aware of any presentations.
And does any member of the public or anyone else have any oral communications they would like to state at this time? And this is for matters that are not on the agenda. Please go ahead and raise your hand and we'll recognize you. I don't see any hands raised, so I guess we have no oral communications. But are there any written communications that are not already part of the agenda?
All written communications has been forwarded to the council already.
Thank you. All right, we get to the consent calendar. Does anybody want to remove anything from the consent calendar? Yeah, I'm sorry. Mayor Pro Tem Makachek, please go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to draw everyone's attention to the written communication from Mary Buxton, and she was complimenting the city on the Winchester Boulevard and the increased safety that's now affording her the opportunity to cycle on Winchester Boulevard. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate her comment. Any other communications or comments? All right, so getting back to the consent calendar, does anybody want to remove any items? This is from 1 through 5 of the consent calendar. I don't see anybody. I need to pull item 3. I have a couple of questions on that. So if you can pull that one out, and in the meantime, for the other items, remaining items 1 through 5, can we have a motion to adopt the consent calendar for those items?
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call, please.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Lawler with the second from Councilmember Turner. Councilmember Leuthold,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes. Yes.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Makachek,
Aye.
and Mayor Elahi.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. So discussing item number 3, that is an award for pedestrian bicycle master plan update. And I had a couple of questions. Who on staff is going to be addressing that?
Hello, Mayor, City Engineer Khan, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Engineer Khan, for being here. My question was, there was a plan done in 2016, and this is considered an update to that plan. I'm wondering how much did the original plan cost us, and is there something that the update could have been done by the city engineer or the streets commission by itself, or do we need to do another master plan update? Because it is about $25,000 or up to $27,000. If you could comment
Sure,
on
so
that.
the original plan was done jointly by the town of Los Gatos and the city. The town had procured a grant from the county, I believe, for that, and the whole thing together was about $130,000. This past year, the town did an update on their staff level. I'm not sure how much it cost them to do that on staff level of their plan. I did take this to the Better Streets Commission and propose that perhaps staff would be completed on a staff level. The desire is to have something that's very Monte Sereno centric. A lot of the updates that Los Gatos did were for items that they had already heavily researched and were in place, and it already had a lot of background work done. We don't really have any of that. There's very few projects that are Monte Sereno centric in the plan, hence doing this update. So while that could be done on a staff level, it's advantageous to have a transportation planner and people who do this every day for a living look at the new updated data, be more aware of updated transportation planning methods to take a look at this update. I will say that in general, this is really affordable. I did look around at other jurisdictions who updated their master plans, and they were more in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. So I think scaling that for Monte Sereno, it's an appropriate cost.
Yeah, I wasn't concerned about the cost itself. I was concerned about, we've done one before. A lot of times these bicycle pedestrian have to do with people who are going to work. We don't have any job sites to go to. So really you're talking about recreational bicycling that's happening, which we do need to make sure that's safe. We also have the next agenda item, which had to do with safe schools. So I'm thinking whether, once we do the plan, how elaborate it's going to be. And the Winchester plan was, is enormous. So I was hoping that the staff and the Better Street Commissions by themselves could review it. One other thing I'm missing is the Better Street Commission looked at it, voted on it, but we don't have a report from the Better Street Commission that we could benefit from since they reviewed it. I mean, the SNA is recorded, but the Better Street Commission is not recorded. I'm hoping that in the future, if the Better Street Commission looks at something, at least we get a memo on why they felt certain way, you know, why they thought it was appropriate, and those who thought it was not appropriate could also tell us. Because it was a 3-2 vote, which means 3 people said yes and 2 people voted against it. So my thought would be to see if the staff can carry this burden, and we can table this item till the staff has had a chance to figure out whether they can do this.
Noted on a memo in the future from the commission. I will definitely do that. I did want to note that it was 3-0-2. 2 of the commissioners were absent. So it was unanimous
Okay.
3-0, just 2 of them were
Okay.
absent.
They were absent. Okay. All right. See, that would help with the report. Yeah, those are my questions. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah, Councilmember Lawler, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so my question is, I mean, I like the idea, obviously, of being Monte Sereno centric. There are a lot of areas that are quite dangerous for bike riding, even and especially for our children, namely Dave's Avenue around that corner towards Twin Creeks. I do like the idea of the Better Streets Commission, and I was wondering if we do go ahead and do this, what is the timeline? They went through a very detailed description of everything that's involved. How long will it take them to accomplish this?
Approximately 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
And any other questions for staff? Okay, I guess I'll open it up to the public. Is there any member of the public who has a question on this item? Receiving none. I guess it's time for a motion. If somebody wants to move to accept the item or not, I will ask for a motion at this time.
I'll move to approve the contract.
I'll second.
All right, roll call, please.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Lawler with the second by Councilmember Turner. Councilmember Luthold,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mekachek,
Aye.
and Mayor Elahi.
Aye,
That motion passes 5-0.
thank you. All right, now we go to our non-consent item calendar. And the first one has to do with adoption of the objective design standards. If you could have the staff report on that, please.
Hello, this is the city planner, Diana. I'm sorry about that. I had a bit of a technical issue.
No problem.
So thank you. And the city had contracted with Metropolitan Planning Group in March of 2021 to develop objective design standards. The process to date has included a community forum that was held in June, work with the council ad hoc committee, a joint study session that was held in October with the city council and the site and architectural commissioners, as well as a public hearing by the Site and Architectural Commission on December 8th. The proposed objective design standards will be supplementary to the existing city design guidelines. The objective standards will be applicable to all projects, but they will serve as the sole design standard for projects where state law prohibits the use of subjective standards. At the December 8th Site and Architectural Commission meeting, the commission made some recommendations for revisions to the objective design standards and rescheduled this item for their January 5th meeting. Staff recommends that the city council provide any comments and direction on the objective standards tonight, and this concludes the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for staff? Councilmember Luthold, then Councilmember Lawler.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to hear staff's opinion on how the objective standards relate to the urgency legislation that we're looking at under item 3. And do we benefit from having the objective standards in place? Is this something completely separate? Or how do those two interact and the timing of those two interact from staff's perspective?
Yes, the objective design standards will be the design standards that will apply to SB9 projects. SB9 projects will not be subject to any discretionary design standard. The goal was to have the objective design standards in place by January 1st, which is the effective date for the state's SB9 legislation. However, with the commissioners' comments that they provided, which did have some good feedback that we are working on addressing, because of the recommendation or the direction that we've been given for the SB9 ordinance to really limit those structures, they are actually, as proposed, which you'll be hearing next on the agenda, they are actually smaller than current accessory dwelling units. And so staff doesn't feel that there will be a negative impact in delaying the objective design standards a few weeks after the SB9 legislation.
And just to supplement the city planner's report there, as I was present at the Site and Architectural Commission meeting, the concern that was raised was that the objective design standards are broader than just SB9 projects and would set, design and architectural standards for all projects moving forward within the city. With respect to the SB9 urgency ordinance, that does include some design requirements and significant, zoning and land use standards already for SB9 projects. Certainly when these objective design standards are complete, they will apply to SB9 projects as well. Just the issue is that the commission had significant comments and recommended some substantial revisions in certain sections. And so I think staff are working on that now.
Councilmember Lawler.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, will we be going through their recommendations piece by piece? I know, because I listened to that meeting after the fact, and I know that things like restricting front porches, et cetera, impervious coverage should be equal to what the original zoning was. So will you be walking us through each of these points tonight?
We can. The impervious coverage criteria was part of their SB9 recommendation. So for their comments on the objective design standards are noted in the staff report. I'd certainly be happy to go over the items individually or all of them if you would like.
I think only just the suggestions that they made. I know it's all in the report, and it was the three things. It was about the trees, it was about impervious restrictions, and it was about restrict covered structures to 18% of proposed imprint. Do you want to just kind of go over those for me real quick, just make sure that I don't have any questions?
So that's the next agenda item. That's the SB9 ordinance.
Oh, I thought that's what we were. Okay, we're just updating. Okay, never mind. But then we'll say, well, they'll just, we'll bank that for next time. Thanks.
We were discussing the objective standards part of it.
Yeah. Sure. Right. Thanks.
Councilmember Turner, you have your hands up.
Mayor Elahi, I think I'm going to postpone my question until the next one as well.
All right, thank you. And if you can all lower your hands once you're done, that'll be appreciated. I'll now take it to the public. Is there any comments from members of the public? And I don't see anything, but I also see Mayor Pro Tem Mekchak's hand up. So please go ahead, Mayor.
I am getting some feedback on the audio, and I'm just going to ask for people that are not speaking if they could go on mute. I think that usually helps matters. That's just a procedural thing.
Mayor Elahi, we do have a public comment from Mr. Tony Jeans. His hand is up.
All right, please go ahead. From Mr. Tony Jeans. Yeah, Mr. thank you for all the information you've sent us, and please go ahead.
Hello there. I am not going to display anything on the screen this time. I'm just going to talk for this aspect of the hearing because I think you're probably going to postpone in the adoption until into January. But my concern is that I really think you're trying to create this one-size-fits-all document in the design standards. And I think that's what Site and Architecture was struggling with. You already have a very good design guideline, which doesn't work for ministerial projects, but works very well to try to keep designers and architects in line when they're designing projects. What I think you really need to come up with is something that acts directly and solely on ministerial projects. I think a lot of the struggle that Site and Architecture were having was, well, do we really want to do the windows like this? What if something is slightly different? What if something comes in front of us when they have the flexibility to allow something different, but you've made it a standard, so they no longer have the flexibility to do it. And you have a committee that is very good at doing this job. So I'm concerned about that. I would like to see some very tight standards on ministerial projects. Let's assume that eventually ministerial projects can be two-story. At the moment, they can't. For example, you should have something that is very radical on second-story windows. You should say that anything that is in the reduced setbacks allowed by ministerial projects should have sills at 6 feet, clear story windows, way up the top, unless access is required for egress. In that instance, you have the minimum required allowed by code. If you do something like that, then you start forcing ministerial projects to think twice about whether they really want to do something. If you make difficult standards for everyone, you are going to create a nightmare that designers and architects cannot follow. And I'm very, very concerned about that. I just took the first one, the landscaping for privacy, plant 1 tree per 300 square feet. Okay, in a 6-foot setback, that's 1 tree every 50 feet. That's meaningless. With a 4-foot setback on SB9, it will be 1 tree every 75 feet. So I don't think we should do this one-size-fits-all standard. I think you need ministerial standards and leave the rest to Site and Architecture. Thank you.
Thank you. I think those are important comments. We appreciate them. Any other member of the public have any comments? Okay, we'll bring it back to council and we'll start with Councilmember Gatos. You have a question or a comment?
Thank you. I have both actually. First is a question / comment, and that is, I saw on the 45-degree setback with the upper story, there was discussion about that out of Site and Architecture, and a concern that the 45 degrees pushes things back too far for second stories. I think that is something, especially in the R18, that is going to need to be looked at and addressed, because the 45-degree proposal would really put the 20-foot corner at the second story gutter, and that would push it back nearly 18 feet from the lot line. And if there's a 4-foot minimum setback, that really is an odd thing. We're really precluding that on the R18 with a 4-foot setback, minimum setback. So I think we might want to look at a 60-degree exception for R18 and keep it at 45 other places. So that's just an area of comment. I put the math into my triangle calculator. But it would also be helpful, I think, when this comes back to us, if someone on planning and staff checks that math to make sure we've looked at what's reasonable. I also think there was potential conflict on the issue of balconies between what was being talked about as possible under Sp9 versus what we were talking about with objective standards. So I think that needs to be cleaned up, and some of the other comments. A question that I have relates to, is probably directed at Sergio as well as planning staff. And it's based on what Mr. Jeans brought up, which is, can we really separate our objective standards and apply them to ministerial projects? Or by definition, are objective standards that apply to everything? And then if we want to, if somebody wants to do something that's not in those objective standards, then they're talking about variances or discretion. Or are we able to apply objective standards to ministerial projects, perhaps different from objective standards for other items?
So I will take a crack at this one. So effective January 1st, 2020, the city cannot adopt any new standards whatsoever, except for objective standards. You can have different objective standards for different classes of projects. You can also have different objective standards for different zoning districts. So yes, in a sense, you could have different objective standards for, say, a single family home that is a single story versus different objective standards for a single family home that's 2-story, or that is, you know, more than 2 units. So you can do that. That I think would be permissible. And additionally, you know, what we're focusing on in terms of these objective standards that are in the design guidelines are design standards. So you're talking about architectural look and feel. You're talking about, you know, placement on the lot. You're talking about a lot of the things that are typically associated with the discretionary land use approval, you know, and are associated with the exercise of discretion. Now, to the extent that you want to make regulations on that, you have to make them pretty specific, and you have to make them objective if you want to make new ones. Now, with certain new classes of projects, such as those created by Sp9, they have to be ministerial, and ministerial means you also have to have them objective for that reason as well. But you don't have to have the same standards for a single family home, you know, that you would have for an Sp9 project. And additionally, if you had subjective standards in place prior to January 1st, 2020, you can continue to apply those. So they don't have to go away. But if you change them or monkey with them, then you probably can't get away with that.
Okay, thank you.
What was the deadline where those had to be, the non-objective standards had to be in place? Was it Jan 1, 2020?
That's correct. That was the effective date of SB 330. So any subjective standards we had in place before then, we can continue to apply, except for whenever there's new legislation that says we can't.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from council members? So we are on item 3, and the recommendation was to continue this. The site and architecture wants this matter to be continued so they can look at it again. And I think we've got some good comments, basically saying, yeah, we do need to adopt objective standards, but let's not get ourselves into a trap where we make them so strict that it doesn't work at all. Because you do want to have people be able to build houses similar to the ones that are in Monte Sereno, or you know, that are consistent with what we have. So I guess planning staff needs to probably keep that in mind as you go forward and see what objective standards we need. And these objective standards are not necessarily going to impact the ministerial discussion that we have to do with the urban lot splits. So we don't necessarily need to apply them or make them so that they're available to us for that also. That's my thought. With that, do we have a motion to continue this matter to a future date?
I'll make that motion to continue this so site and architecture can take another look and staff can work on it.
And I'll second that.
All right, roll call, please.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Luthold with a second by Councilmember Turner. Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Councilmember Luthold,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mekachek,
Aye.
and Mayor Lahi.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda on the new business is the introduction, adoption of urgency ordinance number NS 228. This is number 2. Do we have a staff report on that?
Yes, thank you. This is Diana Perkins, the city planner again. And Senate Bill 9 was signed into law by Governor Newsom on September 16th, 2021, and will be effective on January 1st, 2022. The most significant component of this bill is that it requires ministerial approval of up to 2 housing units per lot, as well as ministerial approval of a one-time 2-lot subdivision on any single-family zoned property. The written staff report includes details of the development activities allowed by the state legislation, a list of properties where the legislation is not applicable, and limitations that are placed on the city by the Sp9 legislation. Although the new law supersedes varying local regulations regarding subdivision and development standards, Sp9 does preserve some authority for local agencies to enact regulations through the adoption of new objective standards. Staff has provided several options of items that could be included in our local ordinance to the Site and Architectural Commission and the council members at a joint study session on November 29th. The clarifications include setbacks, limitation on building height in certain locations, options for allowable building size, parcel configuration, and parcel frontage. The draft ordinance before you tonight includes direction provided at the November 29th joint study session, as well as the December 8th Site and Architectural Commission meeting. Earlier this afternoon, there was also a supplemental recommendation that was provided to council and posted online with the agenda for tonight's meeting. The supplemental recommendations included some minor modifications to the lot configuration for urban lot splits. And these changes were based on some public comments that were received yesterday. Staff recommends that the city council adopt the urgency ordinance as well as the regular ordinance with the supplemental recommendations. This concludes the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Just as a preliminary matter, we are considering 2 separate ordinances. One is the urgency ordinance and one is the non-urgency ordinance. What is the specific difference between the 2 ordinances? If you could just lay that out a little bit.
So the ordinances are essentially the same, but in order to adopt an urgency ordinance, you need a 4/5 vote, passage by 4 affirmative votes, and it has to include statements of findings related to the health and safety justification for going into effect immediately. So upon passage of the urgency ordinance, it goes into effect immediately. And the second ordinance, which is a non-urgency ordinance, is basically belt and suspenders. It is identical in text, but it would go into effect 30 days after second reading. And it is not required to have any sort of urgency findings. And by adopting both ordinances, basically the city would eliminate any sort of potential for being challenged on the fact that there is no urgency in terms of the need to adopt the Sp9 regulations. So.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to have it on the record. And is the staff going to give us the health and safety requirement to meet that complies so that we can adopt the emergency ordinance?
Yes, those are actually drafted and stated in the ordinance itself.
Okay, thank you. Does any council member have any questions? Council member Little, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure there was a mention of supplemental changes today. If we could have those highlighted, I wanted to make sure that we're all aware of them so that if we're adopting with the supplemental changes that were added today, we know that we've looked at the right items on that. So could we get those summarized, please?
Yes. So earlier today, after discussion with city staff, the city staff looked at the requirement to have a 10% lot frontage for urban lot splits and determined that that was not something that was necessarily appropriate for the ordinance. Generally, that 10% lot frontage was intended, I believe, and Diana, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but it was intended to ensure that there was adequate space in order to have access for fire roads, et cetera. And so rather than have a 10% requirement, which may shift, based on the lot and the lot configuration, it just made sense to have a strict requirement to comply with the fire code access requirements, and in the very high fire severity zone, even stricter access requirements, which apply pursuant to state law. And then the other change is that, and this is in the second revision, it is to require that new parcel lines that abut a street shall maintain right angles to the streets or radial center lines of curved streets, or they have to be parallel to the existing parcel lines. So that was the other change. And that was because I believe, Diana, we have some through lots, and so it might not make sense in that sort of scenario. And additionally, we have some other existing lots that don't have that have irregular shapes. And so in those situations, it may make sense to allow people to have lot lines that are parallel to the existing lines as opposed to having some sort of straight line to the street.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Turner?
Yes, I have a question, and I didn't see this in the documentation. Maybe I just missed it. I wanted to ask about the lot split under the provisions of SB9, that we may not have a similar lot split again once we have already split the lot, nor may any other adjacent property under the same ownership or owned by a person acting in concert with the owner be split. Was that in the documentation? Because I didn't see that.
Yes, I believe that is because it's a requirement in SB9. And that is in 1306.020 F and G. F says the parcel has not been established through prior exercise of an urban lot split as provided for in the urban lots provision of the government code and this section. And G, which says neither the owner of the parcel being subdivided nor any other person acting in concert with the owner has previously subdivided an adjacent parcel using the urban lot split as provided for in this chapter. So those are, I believe, the requirements you're referencing.
Okay, I have another question, and that is property subject to CC&Rs. Now, we have properties in Monte Sereno that are subject to CC&Rs. However, we don't have HOAs. So I'd like to see if we could put that in the documentation to say that it will be the responsibility of the owner of the property to bring it up. And maybe for the city, we can actually update our records to show which properties in Monte Sereno are subject to CC&Rs. So those were my two comments. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? I guess we're question time right now. So go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Makachak.
I'm not sure where Councilmember Turner is going with the CC&Rs, but I do know that the 16 houses on Via Sereno are subject to CC&Rs, and they're actually subject to an architectural control committee, but that's never been created, or it's nothing has ever been done on it. So I'm just kind of curious as to what the simple identification of CC&Rs would do. I'm not opposed to it. I'd just like to understand it just a little bit more, how it would affect this.
And I could take a crack at it. As a matter of property law, CC&Rs, create both a contract interest and a property interest, which is enforceable by the courts. But it's a unique interest to the property holder. It's not an interest the city can exercise. And additionally, beyond perhaps making available information about what's in the city's property records, which also anybody can go to the county recorder and obtain. Beyond making people more aware of what might be in CC&Rs, it doesn't seem to me necessarily that would be a valid basis for the city to deny permitting under Sp9. So that's sort of the concern and why that's not in the ordinance at present. However, people who have property that is burdened by CC&Rs or some sort of other restrictive covenants, those people are still entitled to enforce those restrictions against their neighbors if they so desire.
And also, if I were looking for a property to buy, I would like to know whether that property is subject to CC&Rs or not.
Anything else, Councilmember Turner?
No,
All right.
thank you.
Councilmember Luthor, please.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on Councilmember Turner's comments about CC&Rs and pose some more questions here for legal staff probably. So first of all, yes, CC&Rs are part of the package when you buy a property. They're part of the title search. You should have received them when you buy your property. If you don't, there's a problem at the title company end of things. But they're not something that an owner may be thinking about when submitting plans or when pursuing an urban lot split. So my expansion of what Councilmember Turner is bringing up is as part of our Sp9 legislation, and this is a question for legal, can we include that the applicant for the ministerial approval must include a copy of the title report, including any CC&Rs going back to the beginning of their subdivision? That's number one. Can we simply require that that be part of the package presented to the city for ministerial approval? I don't see any reason why we couldn't make that part of it. We're not saying the city is going to approve or not approve. We just make that part of any set of plans. The second thing is, how do we get notice to the neighbors? Because we don't want the first notice to the neighbors when the bulldozers show up and they say, what's going on next door? And then the city says, this was ministerially approved. Good luck with your CC&Rs. So can we make a requirement of these ministerial processes something that puts the neighbors on notice that an applicant is applying for a ministerial approval of something, so that if those neighbors have CC&Rs, choose to do something about it, that they will have notice and can do something in a timely manner?
So with respect to application for development projects, it's a matter of uniform state law. The city is supposed to have a list of everything that is needed to submit a complete application that it makes available to applicants. And basically the city goes through a verification of completion. I don't see any reason why the city couldn't, as a matter of course, require, title records with respect to a project application. I just don't know of many cities that do. And then with respect to notification, again, it's something I think that the city could require of staff. The city can provide notice when an application is deemed complete for these types of things to neighbors. However, once it's deemed complete, assuming that there's not necessarily going to be any sort of opportunity for the public to have meaningful input, even if they are provided notice, because it's a ministerial approval process. Either the application meets the requirements or it doesn't. So that is the reason why there's not a notice provision for most types of ministerial projects in most various city ordinances, not just in this jurisdiction, but in other jurisdictions as well.
All right, I'll bring this back for discussion and some suggestions I'll make for additions and changes when we come back after we finish the public hearing part. But those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Lawler, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question regarding the city's historic resource inventory. I understand that properties listed on this are not susceptible to SB9. I know we have the Steinbeck House. We also have a cul-de-sac via Sereno, which is Mayor Pro Tem Mekachek's cul-de-sac. That is an entire cul-de-sac of Eichlers, which is a very notable architect, historically significant, a post-World War II architect, along the likes of Paul Williams or Reginald Johnson. These are treasures. And if we were to declare those as historic resources after January 1, would they be protected from SB9?
Short answer, likely yes. The ordinance mirrors the SB9 carve out, which is the parcel is subject to a historic district or is property included in the state historic resources inventory, or is within a site designated or listed as a city or county landmark or historic property. So the city does have a historic resources ordinance. So if property does get designated under that, then it would probably be excluded from being approved under a SB9 lot split or an SB9 project.
All right, thank you. I'd like to look into that. Thank you.
Councilmember Turner, you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
I have a question about streets in Monte Sereno where the width is smaller than 12 feet. Can we look at those streets in Monte Sereno and exempt them from SB9? Because if we have a lot of homes on that street and the fire department or the police department cannot go through the street in case of a fire, then we're endangering the lives of people. Can we put that into our SB9?
So to a certain extent, that is already in there with respect to the requirements for access, meeting the California Fire Code, Section 503. And additionally, if you're having an urban lot split, the urban lot split would be within an area of the city zoned as a very high fire severity zone. They would need to meet the requirements of the very high fire severity zone access road requirements.
So can we list out the streets where we have the very high fire severity zone so that it'll be clear to council later on when we're no longer on the council to know what is permissible and what isn't?
So typically, because very high fire severity zone maps are created by the state and they're subject to change, I wouldn't necessarily recommend listing out in the ordinance what those streets are, because the map may change. And then you'd have to go and change your ordinance as well. But there's nothing that would prevent the city from having that information posted on its website. Additionally, I do believe the very high fire severity zones, the maps of that are publicly accessible already.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so basically the suggestion is that the planning staff should be aware when an application comes in that it's in a fire hazard zone and act accordingly. All right, we can do that in discussion. Is there any member of the public who wants to address this question? I don't see any hands. Oh, I'm sorry, I do see one hand now. And okay, that's Mr. James. Please go ahead, Mr. James.
Yes, I wonder if I might have someone set up screen sharing with me.
That would be our clerk, Ms. Radcliffe. Are you able to do that?
Yeah, I just promoted Mr. James as a panelist and he'd be able to share his screen.
Okay, can you see that screen? And can
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I submitted a letter that had a series of items on it. most of which have disappeared. 3 and 4 are now included in the revised NS 228 and 229. I had concern about the 10% frontage, and I also had concerns about properties that were not particularly regular. And those have been put into your revised ordinance. So as long as you accept 228 and 229, I have no further comment on that. The two ones at the top are minor and can really be dealt with at the staff level. And the one at the bottom is really a problem with SB9 itself and really doesn't impact you. And that's a 3-year limitation of occupancy based on recordation of the lot split. If there are no houses there, you can't start that 3-year trigger, but that's not your problem. That's really SB9's problem. I am going to go by my concern that I have for your 800 square foot units. I know you have got them in the ordinance. You want to restrict everything to an absolute minimum. I believe that you are setting the city up for litigation, and I don't want expensive lawsuits to go through the city. So I would like you to give that further consideration. And if it looks as though it's going that way, have a backup plan. I did provide a backup plan. This is what you have basically available to you for a single lot after SB9, and a single lot with an urban lot split. And one of the things you did not do is if you have a house and an ADU and a JADU on one of the parcels in an urban lot split, I believe you're entitled to require the demolition of one of those units or requiring them to put that on the second half of the lot. Having said that, I believe you should be being a little more flexible. Instead of 800 square feet, I think you should be allowing 50% rules for the zoning for ministerial buildings and ADU rules for the second houses. I think you should still require the demolition of the excess third building because you're not required to have it. And I just wanted to take one example of R144 as to what that rule would mean. If someone wanted to build a ministerial building on an SB9, on a R144 lot, instead of allowing 6,000 feet, they could only build 3,000 feet or 3,300 if it's a 1-story, and 1,200.
The 3-minute timer has been, is up, sorry.
Okay, then I can't say any more, but I think 800 feet is dangerous. And I don't want to see a lot of little teeny buildings all over the city. I would favor ministerial rules to restrict what they look like and make them small, but not pathetic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. We appreciate your comments, and you sent some of this to us before. So hopefully we can have a good discussion on all those. Any other member of the public have any comments? I don't believe I see anybody else. I think it's Mr. G's.
We do have one more, Mr. Doug Hall has their hand
Oh,
up.
okay. Mr. Hall, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Mr. Jean's screen there had what I was kind of wondering about. It. We have a R120 lot, and in the past it's been restricted in terms of being able to subdivide. Part of the parcel is on a hill and actually near a creek, but we're just wondering, are we going to be able to potentially subdivide that? And is there a deadline to do that? And does the property, if it is able to do that, if we are able to do that, do we have to fortify that hill before we subdivide it. You're mentioning some things like ministerially approved, so I'm just kind of learning about that. But anyway, that document that Mr. Jeans showed, I'm wondering if we could have access, if that's available to the public. That was pretty interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I think the document is available on the website. It's part of the agenda packet.
It is included as a public comment for that agenda item. It was uploaded when we received it.
Okay.
And the other questions you have, you probably want to talk directly to Ms. Perkins, the planning commissioner. Hopefully she can guide you as to where your proposed project might stand. And also some of it might depend on what resolutions the council adopts today.
Do you think Mr. Rubin might have a comment, or Rudin?
Yeah, normally we don't get into discussions on these panels, so I would request you just take it up with Ms. Perkins.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's see, any other member of the public have any questions or comments? Not seeing any. I guess I'll bring it back to council. And time for council discussion. I think Council Member Luthold kept something that he wanted to say when we came back for discussion. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm certainly open to other discussion points that people might want to bring up, but I do want to offer an amendment either now or later that we add the requirement that two things that be added. One, that the application requirements be amended for the urgency ordinance and the regular ordinance here with the Sp9, and we can address the rest of this later for the rest of our ordinances, to include the requirement that title information regarding any possible CC&Rs be included as part of the application packet first. And second, that notice, staff provide notice to the members of the public within 750 feet of the site when the application is deemed completed, so such that those members of the public would then have the opportunity to take a look at the plans and the application materials, including those CC&Rs. That would give the public a chance to determine whether they want to enforce. This is important because if the public doesn't enforce CC&Rs, they can be deemed waived and lost. And so each neighborhood is going to need to make decisions about that. There are many neighborhoods that have these CC&Rs. The city may be able to build up a map of those over time, but it's really not our responsibility to do that. It's the neighbor's responsibility. I'm part of the Billy Jones Railroad subdivision. I know Councilmember Lawler is part of the Blanchard subdivision. Mr. Mekachek is part of that group of Eichlers. And each of us has to police our own if our neighbors care. So these are very important. They were important when the church zoning was an issue. The church is part of Blanchard, next door to me, and in Ms. Lawler's area. So I do want to offer that as an amendment, either now or later.
Okay. Any other discussion, comments? Councilmember Lawler, please go ahead.
I'll just agree with Councilmember Luthold's additions. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll call that a second.
Well, we don't quite have a motion yet, but we'll get there. I just had a couple of comments or questions, I guess. First of all, on the notice, I think that's a good idea. I don't know if we have to wait till the application is completed. Is there any other point in that application process where notices could be sent out, which is like substantially completed, so that anybody who wants to object, and objection would basically be they'd have to take it to court. I don't think they can take it to city council and say, do something. They would need some time to move forward even on an ex-parte basis. So is there an earlier period than final completion of the application that a notice could be sent out?
We could send notices when an application is received.
Okay. And in between the receive portion and the finishing portion, is there any other time period? Because sometimes these things take 6 months, right? Before they finally get completed. But I mean, that's a good suggestion. Do you have any other trigger points that could be looked at? Ms. Perkins?
There isn't really any other sort of concrete trigger.
Okay,
If you do want something in sort of staff's discretion when an application is close to being approved, but that could be different for timing for different projects.
yeah, so I think the trigger is important, so you can offer that too. So that should be considered. The second thing I wanted to ask, and maybe Council Sergio Rudin can answer that. In these ministerial approval applications, can we also require the applicant to indemnify the city if somebody sues us because we didn't do something right?
Yes, we can, and it is typically a standard city condition of approval. I would expect it also to be a standard city condition of approval for ministerial permits, the same that it is for all other permits.
Excellent. All right, those were my comments. Anybody else have any comments? Now it's a good, yeah, sorry.
I have a question. Are the subdivisions, are there any way, is there any way a subdivision is similar to CC&Rs or not? By law?
So if I may jump in, the subdivisions such as Blanchard or Billy Jones were what created the CC&Rs. As far as I know, that the CC&Rs were the contract between the properties as the subdivision was created.
I understand Blanchard and the other street that you mentioned. I'm more worried about streets that are subdivisions in Monte Sereno. And would that imply that they have CC&Rs or not? Or they have to go and check? I know that there are subdivisions in Monte Sereno in certain streets, certain cul-de-sacs. I think maybe Becky may be one of them. Rose may be one of them, but I don't know if they have CC&Rs or not.
So short answer, there is no requirement that there be CC&Rs when a subdivision occurs. A subdivision literally just means you're taking a piece of land and cutting it into pieces. And that may be one, cutting it into 2 pieces or cutting it into 25. And the approval of a subdivision is just approval of the slicing of the pieces. Now, what happens with the pieces afterwards, that tends to be a matter of what the developer decides. And if they record CC&Rs against all 20 pieces, then they're all enforceable against those 20 pieces.
Okay.
So it's a slightly separate process.
Okay.
So hopefully the title report will show that. Councilmember Makachek. I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Makachek.
Thank you. This isn't for the ordinance, but just administratively, could we have our city planner identify for city council every time she receives an application for an Sp9 subdivision, just so that we have our finger on the pulse of the activity rate that's going on in the city? I find that would be helpful so that when constituents are asking us questions, which I find they do, it'd be nice to be able to have that information.
I suspect that could be added to the notice requirement. The notice goes out to the 750 people who are within 750 feet and also goes to each council member.
Yes, we could certainly do that. Yes.
Or alternatively, the city could just have a standing agenda item, every 2 months there, or every quarter, there's a report on how many of these we do.
Okay, sounds good. All right, this is a good time for the motion on this matter. Anybody want to make a motion with the amendments or otherwise?
So I guess I would suggest so that we do it best. Mr. Rudin, are you able to restate what I said, or would you prefer I try to take a stab at it?
see. So with respect to your suggestions, I believe what you are looking for is you are asking that the application materials for an SB9 project, and that's both the 2 units on 1 lot and the approval of a lot split.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. With respect to the 2 units on 1 lot, the city code already provides that applications for site development permits, which, you know, the site development permit process will still be used for this. The permits have to be submitted, you know, in a manner, in an application form as required by the city. So I don't think we need a code modification for that, to ask for covenants, conditions and restrictions or other title restrictions affecting the use of the property. With respect to the urban lot split, let's take a look at this. Let's see. I would recommend that we modify 1306.020 to say an application for a parcel map shall be approved ministerially by the city engineer, where the applicant has submitted an application in the form required by the city, comma, has paid the application fee, comma, which may be established by resolution of the city council, and demonstrates the application meets the following requirements. So it would be modification of that so that the city has additional control over the form of the application. And then the other thing that you mentioned was a requirement for notice. And for hearings before the Site and Architecture Commission, the existing city code, which this ordinance doesn't modify, requires that notice be provided within 300 feet of the project. So is the idea that we would have notice being provided further upon submission of an application? So the only concern I have with upon submission of an application is you may end up having the public get notified several times or early, or get notified and then the applicant never completes the application and it's rejected. So it may be premature to notify people before a complete application. And that's the only logistical question that I have for the council. But legally, we could notify them every time. You know, we could have a notification requirement anytime an application form is submitted. It just may not be. It may be overkill. But if the council wanted to have that, we would modify 1008.050E and to just state at the end of that, you know, upon receipt of a either completed or just application, you know, the city shall cause notification of all property owners within X hundred feet of the proposed project. So I will leave it to the council to discuss what they would like to do with respect to that notification requirement, if anything.
What is the time period within which the city is required to approve the ministerial application?
Typically, it would be within 60 days.
Yeah, I mean, is there a statutory limit and within which we have to move on it? I thought there was some kind of a requirement that you had to get this done quickly.
Permit Streamlining Act generally says you have to approve a development application project within 60 days of determining it's exempt from CEQA. These projects are all exempt from CEQA because they're ministerial approvals.
Okay.
So.
All right, Councilmember, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Mekchuk, you had a question?
Yes. Could we have the notice on the initial application and then do a second notice on the completed application? So that if I was to apply, someone was to initially apply, the people in the, you know, within X feet would get a notification that it's coming. And then when the actual application is complete, then they get another notice, but they don't get 2, 3, 4 notices. You know, they'll get only 2 on the initial application and then when the application is complete. And I defer to Councilmember Leuftold if he would accept this type of notification.
Yeah, so if I may, I think that's an excellent idea, Mayor Pro Tem, that it be at the initial and then at the completed. That'll give people 2 notices, if they don't decide not to do anything, that's on them. So I think that's a great idea. And then speaking to the distance, I've never liked the 300 feet with a lot that's 100 feet wide. You're talking about only 2 or 3 lots distance. So I would actually like to see us increase this to either 500 or 750 feet. Yes, it'll be more stamps on the mail on the notice going out, but I think we really owe it to our citizens to make sure that enough people in these areas know what's going on, that they can take action if they care, since this is on them.
Mayor Pro Tem Makachak.
I would support that, Councilmember Luthvol.
Okay, so we had the start of a motion. Let's see if we can complete that. Attorney Rudin, are you in a position now to formulate that for us?
So is the general desire here also to modify the 300 feet notice requirement for site and architectural hearings as well?
If we're really talking only about this ordinance, I believe at this time, do we have the opportunity to address that at this time? Or is that something that we need to bring up separately as we're looking at other city ordinances with site and architecture?
It might be a good idea to not have make it more difficult for ministerial approvals. So if you're going to extend the thing, we should go ahead and extend it for other projects also.
And so I think we'll probably need to bring back a look at our site and architectural guidelines and rules, and maybe that'll come in when we're dealing with objective standards. But I would suggest that we ought to expand it in general, and maybe 600 feet, 500 feet, 750 feet. I don't know if other people have opinions. I don't want this to be burdensome to staff, but I do want to make sure that lots of neighbors know if some of them are not paying attention. There's usually someone who will pick up the ball on that. So does staff have an opinion about what might be reasonable in terms of the number of houses that we'd be notifying, whether 500, 600, 750 is best?
I do not have a specific recommendation. Certainly whatever policy of the extent of noticing that council wants to make, we can certainly implement. I know I've only been here a few months, but generally I would say the projects that we've noticed over the past 6 months usually have between 20 and 40 notices that go out on the 300-foot radius. If that gives you an idea of what you might do, change it to.
I thought I was like, if I can go to Target today. But you didn't want to go after this.
All right, thanks. Maybe I would suggest then that we double that to 600 feet.
All right, so
and sorry, one other thing, Mayor, if I may. I did want to just ask Mr. Rudin, perhaps. I believe what I heard on the CCNR's issue was that can simply be added at the city level to require that the CCNRs be part of the application packet with the 1306 020. But in an abundance of caution, would it make sense for us to add that to our ordinance here, just to make certain that it is always a requirement as opposed to relying on staff either adding that or not adding that?
I would say that I'm personally comfortable trusting staff, but it's sort of the pleasure of the council. The way that it's phrased has a benefit that we don't have to go and revise our city codes every time our application requirements change. It just says in a form prescribed by the city. Additionally, since we use the site development permit application for a variety of different kinds of projects, it makes sense to give some flexibility in the exact code language. But again, if the council wants to codify a specific, requirement for these types of projects, it certainly can.
Okay, I guess I'm fine. Just we can come back, and again, we'll be talking objective standards and all. But it sounds like with a nod from multiple council members, we can simply make that part of our approval process for potentially everything, and make sure that the city is more aware of the CCNRs, and they're easier to obtain being in the packet of the applications most of the time. So it sounds like we don't need that.
All right. Any other comments or questions? So I think we have a motion, although I think it may be worth repeating what the motion is. Attorney Rudin, if you could do that.
All right, and I'm just typing up my notes.
All right. Thank you.
So that would be a motion to introduce waive reading of ordinance NS 228 as set forth in the second revised ordinance with the following modification. Section 1306.020 requirements, modify the second sentence to read: an application for parcel map urban lot split shall be approved ministerially by the city engineer where the applicant has paid the application fee, submitted an application of form prescribed by the city, and paid the application fee, which may be established by resolution of the city council, and demonstrates the application meets the following requirements, : additionally, the following modification to 1008.050.e, add: the city planner shall cause notice to be sent to property owners within 600 feet upon submission of an application, and again upon completion of such application. And then to 1306.030, add subparagraph D: the city engineer shall cause notice to be sent to property owners within 600 feet upon submission of an application, and again upon completion of such application. So this would modify this would add 600-foot notice requirements to the two Sp9 projects specifically.
Thank you. Is that your motion, Councilmember Luthor?
Yes.
Any second? Okay, second. Please call the roll.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Luthold with a second by Mayor Pro Tem Mekachek. Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Luthold,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mekachek,
Aye.
and Mayor Elahi.
All right.
That motion passes 5-0.
So that had to do with the urgency ordinance. And we also have the regular ordinance as part of this agenda item. Is there a similar motion on the second one? On the, which is the introduction and waiving of the first reading of ordinance number NS-229.
Yes, and I would recommend the council introduce ordinance number 229 by title only, waive first reading, and make the following modifications on introduction. Modify 1306.020, modify the second sentence to read: an application for parcel map urban lot split shall be approved ministerially by the city engineer where the applicant has submitted an application in a form prescribed by the city, paid the application fee, which may be established by resolution of the city council, and demonstrates the application meets all the following requirements, : and additionally, modify 1008.050.e to add: the city planner shall cause notice to be sent to property owners within 600 feet upon submission of an application, and again upon completion of such application. And modify 1306.030 by adding subparagraph D: the city engineer shall cause notice to be sent to property owners within 600 feet upon submission of an application, and again upon completion of such application.
So moved.
And yeah, I'm just going to say, Councilor Luthol, that's your motion also?
Yes.
Second.
And it's a second by Mayor Pro Tem Mekachek. If you can call the roll, please.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Councilmember Luthold,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mekachek,
Aye.
and Mayor Elahi.
All right.
That motion passes 5-0.
All right, excellent. So now we move on to the next item, which has to do with discussion, item number 3, discussion and consideration on forming an information technology services ad hoc committee. Is there a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Elahi. This is Stephen Leonardis, City Manager. As was requested at our last council meeting, council wanted to put on the agenda exploring the formation of an ad hoc committee to look into IT services. And that is what we did at the last council meeting on December 3rd. I'm sorry, December 7th, excuse me. Council already had voted on a new IT proposal, and the current IT contract was noticed for termination. So this would be, I would imagine, for future discussion on IT services, and that would be the purpose of the ad hoc committee, not necessarily to revisit the council's previous vote. That concludes my comments on this item, and I am open for questions. We did receive one or two pieces of correspondence which had been added, I think, to our agenda package regarding this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Hearing none, I guess I'll open it up to the public. Is there any, I see one hand raised from the public. I can't tell who it is right now, but yeah, it's Mr. Former Mayor Burton Craig. Please go ahead. If you can unmute yourself.
All right.
Go ahead.
Hello, Council. It's been a while since I've spoken with you.
Good to see you.
And good to hear you all also. So I am, first of all, in favor of you forming your ad hoc committee. In fact, I think that you should have a standing committee that meets a little more frequently than what you might be planning to do with your ad hoc committee. And hopefully you will take that under advisement. And I'm also just very disappointed to see that we have changed our IT service provider. Since the current IT provider has come in, he's done an outstanding job in bringing the city's computer systems up to industry standards. And this has not gone unnoticed by the residents. And when I looked at the contract for this new IT consultant, several items were concerning. My first question is, why wasn't the current IT provider allowed to bid on the IT contract? And why were there no cost comparisons in the staff report? There was a mention of significant savings, but I was part of the council when we brought this IT consultant on, and I know what we pay him. And comparing those costs to the current contract, I don't see significant savings. There may be a few dollars here and there, but I mean, if we're going to shave dollars, make sure we're shaving it in the right areas. When you start skimping on IT services, you really leave yourselves open for disaster. When I look at the contract, I see that a business continuity plan is listed as optional or as a separate project. With malware and ransomware on the rise, especially targeting government and other institutional organizations, this should not be acceptable. And I don't understand why the council would approve a contract that didn't contain a well-defined and actionable disaster recovery plan. In terms of service levels, why would we allow a system to be down for 48 hours? This is what keeps the city running, and to allow a system to be down for 48 hours would be unacceptable in any other business. And support levels, and I should say support only between 8:30 and 5. Well, the city does business way past those hours, and I hope that the city is able to get good support and service outside of normal business hours. I was also wondering why you would pick a consultant that's 25 miles away, especially when your existing consultant was only 4 miles away. And since there are charges for being more than 30 minutes travel time, I hope we're not going to be paying a lot of extra fees because of this.
Thank you.
Yep, I know.
Very good. Time is up. But
have a good time, guys.
Yeah, we do appreciate your comments. And if Mr. Linares would like to address some of those questions, and they're also in the email, that would be helpful. Or if somebody else can address those, that would be helpful. In the meantime, I guess we're back to the council for discussion. First of all, Mr. Leonardis, do you have any response to any of those comments? Yeah, I do want to give you that option, right?
Steve, your microphone is on mute.
Thank you, Mayor Elahi. Staff is confident on the new service and its ability to perform on behalf of the city of Monte Sereno and its residents, and council's adoption of the agreement at the last meeting. We did go through what is required for the needs of Monte Sereno, and we look forward to the new service provider doing a good job for us. And it is not uncommon for cities to choose new providers for different services when they are serving their residents. And this is just one of those steps that was made by the management, as well as being supported by staff at Monte Sereno. So once again, we look forward to the implementation of the new service provider, and I think you will be very happy going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardis. Back to City Council. Anybody else have any questions or discussions? So, yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Leonardis. I'm sorry, not Leonardis, Councilmember Lutho.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I had expressed my concern last time about this, about it coming by surprise and moving quickly. I think move fast and break things is a really bad idea when it comes to IT. So I was not pleased about the surprise. And I think IT is probably one of the most mission critical things that the city is going to face going forward. Given the lack of depth internally on IT matters, I think it's extremely critical that we, the council, step in and bring some of our expertise to this. The question, there's no question in my mind that we need to take action. I think the way to do that is either with an ad hoc committee or a standing committee. I think an ad hoc committee is kind of quickest and most flexible. If other council members are interested in setting it up as a standing committee, that's certainly something that we could look at, or we could start with the ad hoc and then transition it. So I am all for having an ad hoc committee, and I'm willing to serve on the committee. And I'm also willing to not serve on the committee if other people feel that they are interested and bring skill sets to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Makachuk, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's important that we do have an ad hoc committee very quickly. And whether it's an ad hoc committee and then it evolves into a standing committee, that's not for tonight. What I would volunteer to do would be to participate in the ad hoc committee and come back to council at the second meeting in January with a report of findings, and maybe not a big written report, so that we have a discussion on the agenda as to what the ad hoc committee has found and what they would like council to consider going forward. So, you know, not having the authority to make a decision, but to do the fact finding for council to make an informed decision on moving forward.
Thank you. Any other council member? I see Councilmember Turner's hand, and then Councilmember Lawler. Councilmember Turner?
Yes. Back in 2018, one of the things that I did is I looked at city staff, and many of our processes were done with paper and pencil. So I brought in ClearGov to come in and do our budget and finance, and also more recently even C-Click-Fix. As I look at the things that we have at at Monte Sereno, there are some things we can't expand on. I don't believe, I look at what we have decided on, let's leave that on. However, there are some things that we could look at. For example, code enforcement software. Many of our citizens are complaining, we need to know when the inspections were done. We need to be able to identify code violations, notices that were given to our neighbors that the person next door didn't know about. The other thing is with planning and zoning, as we get into Sp9, we should look at documenting ADU permits. Street openings is something that we looked at. Lot splits, driveway permits, soil movement permits. These are some of the things that we could look at as part of the ad hoc committee. Record retention is also important. And electronic management software is something that we should look at. Let's also look at house inspections, right? Lead abatement, rental properties. Are there any rental properties in Monte Sereno? And with Sp9, that even becomes more important, that we don't have rental properties more than 30 days. We can look at flood management. Now, one of the things that was mentioned here was security. We are, in this day and age, we can just get software out there that addresses security and event management. There are so many companies that will offer security software. So we can have DICOR networks give us the service, and then we can add Splunk, for example. We could add the McAfee system. We can add Elastic. We can add Datadog. We can add IBM. And the way all of this would work is they would talk using APIs, right? So that would be a programming interface that is standard in the industry. One of the most important security flaws that we have today for the pandemic is the Log4 shell. So I think these are some of the things we could look at down the line. I think we should leave our decision to move forward with DICOR management, and then we can look at all of those who want to be able to come in and work with the city again. One more thing I want to mention. With this ad hoc committee, it is really important that we include staff. We cannot just have council members because we have no idea what's happening with staff and in the data center. So what I would suggest is that we put in either our city manager as part of the ad hoc committee, or I think at this point in time, we have Michelle Radcliffe, who is now acting as our IT person as we move on. So those are my suggestions.
Thank you, Councilmember Turner. Appreciate those suggestions. And Councilmember Lawler, please go ahead.
Great, thank you. Yes, I completely agree with Councilmember Turner. We've moved in a new direction. We've hired a new firm. It's a done deal. I think we need to give them an opportunity to demonstrate their expertise. In fact, there is more than one IT guy in Silicon Valley. So I think we owe them the opportunity to show us what they can do. While I also agree that down the road, we should potentially look at what other things can we do to improve our security within the city. And I agree with Councilmember Turner's idea that would absolutely require staff to be included. But at this time, we chose to go with a bigger firm. We have benefited hugely by choosing a bigger firm, by hiring our city attorney. Bigger firms bring more resources and more flexibility. And we are in Silicon Valley. I think that we should absolutely give them the opportunity to do their job. Thank you.
Any other comments here? Councilmember Luthor, please.
Thank you. I just want to make it clear that this is not anything against staff or against DICOR or against change in my bringing this up. I'm bringing it up because of the issues raised by Councilmember Lawler and Councilmember Turner, that this really is an opportunity for us to leverage the larger firm that we're working with, to improve things further. And most importantly, I am very concerned, not about the existing IT services, but I'm very concerned that the city implement very sophisticated recovery plans and data security plans, data management, and then going with what Councilmember Turner has said about improving the services that we provide our citizens. So this is really not something that's backwards looking or looking to be upset about something that's happened in the past, but to leverage the opportunity going forward. So I think this is really the idea of the ad hoc committee, and my bringing it up is because I think that our council members have a lot of expertise that we can bring to the table. And it's clear that really all members of the council have strengths on this. So I think Mayor Pro Tem Mekachuk's comment about moving quickly on this with some findings and some reporting back to the council is an excellent idea. And again, as I said, I'm happy to stay out of this if Councilmember Turner and Mr. Mekachuk or Councilmember Lawler and others want to be involved. I think everybody can maybe seek out Mayor Elahi, and as he's defining who's on which committees and commissions, this is the ad hoc committee here is something that he could listen to everybody and then help populate. So my suggestion is we move forward with an ad hoc committee, and then everybody can talk to the mayor about their ideas about who should be on it and how it can come back quickly.
Councilmember Turner, you had your hands up first, so then Councilmember Lawler. You're on mute.
What I'd like to suggest, looking at IT is a very broad area. So we should compartmentalize this. For example, some of us have a lot of experience with security and event management. Some of us may have a lot of experience with planning and zoning. Some of us may have experience with city clerk functions, like clothing bin donation. That's what I keep hearing now from our youth commission, right? Pet licensing, bids and requests. So we can compartmentalize this, and the overall person that would manage this would be somebody from staff, because they know what they really need at City Hall. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Councilmember Lawler.
Well, I was going to suggest that if we do move forward with an ad hoc, that we stipulate in the motion that a staff member would be involved. And I would certainly ask that Councilmember Turner would be included. Thank you.
Okay. It's time for a motion. So Councilmember Lawler, are you making a motion? Go ahead.
All right, I'll make the motion that we create an ad hoc committee, and that the committee look into initially all issues regarding IT at the city. And I'll suggest that, as Councilmember Lawler suggested, that it be that the committee also be charged with working with staff in doing this. So the motion is to form the committee, and then we'll worry about staffing it later.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, I guess, all right, roll.
Okay, got a motion by Councilmember Lethal, but with a second by Councilmember Turner. Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Councilmember Lethal,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mekachuk,
Aye.
and Mayor Elahi.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Yeah, so the matter before us was the formation of the Information Technology Service Ad Hoc Committee. So whoever is interested, please send me your names and I will try to see if we can put a committee together. And as far as staff is concerned, also send me some suggestions as to who should be on that committee representing staff. Hopefully that will do it. So now we go to the next item, which is the committee commission reports. Do we have any committee commission reports? Mayor Pro Tem Makachek, please go ahead.
I would just like to update council on what's happening with San Jose Water Company. And we just finished yesterday's, the 6th day of evidentiary hearings. And basically it was W rates, that's WRATES is the acronym. They were the only ones that cross-examined people from San Jose Water Company. And it was 6 full days of evidentiary hearings. And I ended up cross-examining the chief financial officer on 2 of those days in 2 half-day sessions. The next steps are to put together briefs and then submit that to the administrative law judge for her to consider in setting the rates. At the same time, San Jose Water Company and Cal Advocates appear to be entering into a settlement agreement, and they had advised the ALJ, the administrative law judge, that they were doing so, and they've got some 30 days to put a settlement agreement in front of the judge. And what that means is they will have agreed to what they believe the revenue requirement and the water rates should be going forward. So that's a brief update. Oh, I will say that settlement agreement is going on in parallel, and subsequent to the settlement agreement, then there can be a protest of that settlement agreement. So it all gets very complicated and murky, but I just wanted council to know that things are moving ahead, and I will report back when there's more reporting to be done.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any other committee commission reports? All right, next item is council member comments. If there's some other comments to be made, please go ahead, Council Member Lawler.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to the fact that the assembly district lines have been finalized for our assembly district. And Assembly District 28 looks vastly different than it did before. Assembly District 28 includes Monte Sereno, Los Gatos, south to Santa Cruz, and out towards Morgan Hill. Assembly Member Lowe will no longer be residing in 8028. Campbell is in a different district. So this will make for some very interesting representation in the next election. Thank you.
Thank you for the report, and thank you for staying on top of that, and please keep us posted too, because the congressional district, I understand, has also been split up, so an issue may no longer be representing us. So that may be coming down the pipeline. Any other councilman reports? Councilperson's report, I guess. Right? Yeah, Councilman
Yes,
please go ahead.
yes. I'd like for Sergio to give us an update on his conversation with Cities Association's legal counsel on the charges that we had to pay for the roundtable.
Well, I can, since this is such a brief comment and report, I don't think we'll need to agendize it. But I was informed by their legal counsel and their manager that they had no plans at present to build the city and that they'd be building the roundtable first for all expenses incurred. And if the roundtable did not pay, then that might come back to the city for further discussion, and in which case I will involve the council as needed.
Thank you.
So any other comments? Councilmember Leothard, please.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of comments. First, I wanted to thank Mayor Pro Tem Mekachek for his work on the water issues. It's an incredible amount of work. It's a huge project. It's an overwhelming issue, and it's very important to our citizens. I want to say thank you on behalf of everyone for all that you've done on this. So thank you. Second, a huge thank you to staff and site and architecture, especially on the Sp9 and the objective standards for all the work you've done on this. We've been on a really tight deadline since this was passed, I think September, and you've done incredible work. Thank you so much for bringing the Sp9 urgency legislation to us today in such a complete and comprehensive form. And as I say, so for staff, site and architecture, members of the public who've commented and helped on that, Councilmember Turner especially as well. So thank you everyone for your hard work on that, and thank you in advance for continuing to work on the objective standards part of it.
Thank you. Any other council member comments? I guess I join former Mayor Leothard in thanking the staff and the Site and Architecture Committee for doing all the work, and Councilmember Turner. And also would like to thank former Mayor Leothard for all the work he did in moving this forward and keeping the urgency in mind to make sure we didn't miss any deadlines. And hopefully we haven't. We adopted it, so we've met the December 31st deadline on the urgency on the emergency ordinance, and the bells and whistles backup is on its way. So good job on that. Next, city manager's report. Manager Leonaris, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Elahi. Just a couple quick items of note. We're going to be having some inclement weather for about the next week. Lots of rain. We'll be getting some potential snow on the hillsides. Everybody stay warm and try to stay well during this holiday season. And if there are any issues for those in the public listening this evening, we will still cover your issues with cleaning out drains and flooding and all those things over the holidays. Of course, if you just call City Hall and or email citymanager@cityofmontesereno.org. We have received a number of items, at least 30 articles of clothing from our Monte Sereno Youth Commission's annual coat drive. This is the second annual coat drive. So we want to thank the public for bringing those items in and encourage, if they have any more items, to continue to bring them in. There is a table outside of City Hall. Please put the items on the table and staff will collect those. And we will be doing this through December 31st. We will be bringing those items to West Valley Community Services to be distributed to those in need this season. And that concludes my comments this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is future agenda items. Would you want to put something else on the agenda next time or in the future? Please go ahead. Councilmember Lawler.
Thank you. I don't know if this is really more for discussion, but I would like to explore creating a historically significant district for Via Sereno at some point this coming year.
Okay. Could be a future agenda item. Any other items? I'd like to go back to exploring having hybrid meetings or live meetings. I know the Omicron virus is around and spreading, but I'd like to suggest that starting January or the February meeting, we should be moving towards doing at least a hybrid meeting. And then we can then follow up with doing face-to-face meetings. I think we're losing something by meeting on Zoom all the time. I think we're also gaining something, but the efficiency studies that are being conducted now say that Zoom meetings are lowering efficiency for everybody else. We're very efficient on Zoom, but I would like to get that explored. So we can put that on a later January agenda item to have a discussion on that subject. I would appreciate that. Any other agenda items? Okay, I guess we don't have anything else, so we're ready to adjourn. Thank you so much, and thank you for making my first meeting an easier one than I thought it would be. Mayor Pro Tem Max Chuck, you had something.
Oh, I would just like to thank our city clerk for her first Zoom meeting management, and I thought it was well done. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Lawler.
Thank you.
Yes, that was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, City Clerk Michelle. That was great. And everyone have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Councilmember Leotold.
Yeah, mine was just adding my thanks and happy holidays, everyone. Stay well.
All right, well, happy holidays, everybody, and thank you so much. Look
Thanks.
forward to seeing you in the new year.
Happy holidays.
Okay. Good night. And thank you, Attorney Rudin, also, I guess. You've done a good job. Take care.
And happy holidays to you too, folks. See you in the new year.